Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedom and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Mat Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country. In the courtrooms of America, Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedom.
Did the United States Department of Justice actually get involved and promote some of the protest in the Trayvon Martin case? Believe it or not, there's some evidence that, in fact, that's what happened. Our guest today on Faith and Freedom is Lisette Garcia, and she has performed a Freedom of Information Act and has some startling information to share with us today. Welcome to Faith and Freedom, Lisette.
Thank you, Mr. Staver. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, you have been doing Freedom of Information Acts on just not only this case, but other cases around the country where you're filing information with regards to requests from the federal government, asking them to promote and provide documents. Tell us what happened in this case regarding Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, where there were obviously protests around the time of this situation before the trial actually began, before he was actually indicted. And you have some new startling information about that. Tell us about it.
That's right, Mr. Staver. It turns out that the federal government had a very small little section of the U.S. Department of Justice which swooped down to Sanford, apparently helped coordinate, arrange. It's not entirely clear how much in terms of resources they provided as far as the buses of bringing students, but they certainly were on the ground setting up meetings, hosting meetings, indeed, with the pro-Trayvon Martin crowd, which wasn't from Sanford. So it's interesting that this little-known section of the Department of Justice that likes to call itself the Peacekeepers or the Peacemakers, that in fact they spent over $20,000 to bring staff from 8 states to this sleepy little town, supposedly to quell civil unrest, but in fact they had to actually import the people who had unrest about it.
You know, it's very interesting. I am from the Central Florida area. I'm very familiar with Sanford, Florida. And before this Trayvon Martin situation happened, and obviously it's a tragedy for all that's involved.
Of course.
But there was no racial division that was obviously prominent. And, of course, this thing became focused on race at the very beginning.
Indeed, immediately after the arrest of Zimmerman, the FBI concluded that there was no racial animus. And yet here we are a year later, and DOJ has opened a hotline nationally for tips from as far as Alaska and Hawaii to find out any tips that Zimmerman might have been a racist. And so I've subsequently filed a FOIA request for all records relating to the decision, what would have prompted such a decision in light of the FBI's conclusive investigation that there was no racial animus involved.
Well, I know a number of pastors got together when this happened a year or so ago, and black pastors, white pastors, Hispanic pastors, they all came together in a show of racial unity among these pastors to try to confront what was taking place. There was some obviously outside forces trying to stir up this issue of race. It's shocking, however, to see that the federal government was actually involved in helping to promote this.
Of course. You know, to think that how much crime, we just saw a news report yesterday that many informants are allowed to commit crimes nationwide because they're on the government dime, and so we're not spending enough resources to prevent and stop, just eliminate actual crimes, and yet we're, devoting serious resources to going and creating some sort of like a conflict or an upset. It's outrageous, really. $20,000, it's outrageous.
Now, when you actually filed this Freedom of Information Act request on this Trayvon Martin situation, whether the Department of Justice was involved, did they immediately just hand the documents over, or did they delay, and how did the process work?
Well, I've been a news reporter for 15 years, and it's always been my practice that if two people are involved in a conversation and one won't tell the truth or kind of just hedges, ask the other party to the conversation. So in point of fact, I didn't just file a Freedom of Information Act request with Department of Justice because I didn't count on them being forthcoming or prompt. So I also filed requests with Miami-Dade County, the school board, as well as the county itself. Sanford, which was very helpful and prompt in its delivery of materials, including an audio tape that showed the Peacekeepers holding a church meeting. that resulted in the ouster of the police chief against the wishes of the city council. So I hedged my bets, and of course that encouraged the Department of Justice, let's just say, to be more honest and forthcoming and deliver the documents. I did have to appeal, so on the first go-around, they did provide some documents, but not necessarily a full accounting, and they felt that a lot of the documents were not available to the public despite the law because of privacy concerns for the federal officers. But in fact, if they're just mediators, if they're not law enforcement officials, which is what their mission says, that the peacekeepers are just about keeping peace and not creating, not arresting anybody or investigating anyone in a law enforcement capacity, then they can't use that law enforcement exemption. So on the second go around, they did release the names and credit card numbers and approving officials.
Now you're calling them, of course, we know this is the Eric Holder, President Obama, Department of Justice. It's the highest law enforcement agency in the United States. And in fact, as part of that, they also have what you're referring to as peacekeepers. What is that entity about?
Well, it's just this tiny department that was enabled through the Civil Rights Act, apparently. And, you know, it was a small section that probably was intended with all the best intentions to send people to places like when the Rodney King riots happened, you know, how to, like, I suppose, heal rifts after the fact. But in fact, in this case, they went to a place where there were no protests until they arrived. They actually proactively reached out to the Republican National Convention officials. That convention wasn't scheduled for several months ahead of what was happening in Sanford, and for several, you know, at least an hour and a half drive away, and yet they felt it was important to go warn them that protesters were coming. How did DOJ know in advance that protesters were coming? Meanwhile, on the heels of the Zimmerman's acquittal and really vindication, there were apparently cars set on fire in Oakland and some unrest in Los Angeles and other places very far away from Sanford. And we didn't hear a peep about peacekeepers going there. So it causes me to question whether the peacekeepers are actually doing the mission they were created for. And you can see on the website, actually, that the Obama administration takes great pride in that section has mushroomed in size and has additional resources and personnel. No matter, despite the sequester that's in place across the federal government due to our economic straits right now, they felt the need to bolster up their forces and hire more bodies and give them promotions.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's shocking that this entity that's called the Peacekeepers, that I can understand had an original intent to try to keep the peace and keep racial unity, but actually be using federal tax dollars to go down into Sanford, and rather than keep the peace, actually cause division, actually stir up racism there where there was really no racial division before they came, and actually promote these protests rather than bringing peace. It's doing exactly the opposite, and it seems as though it's consistent with this president where he wants to divide people, whether it's race or any other way. He is a divider rather than a uniter.
I couldn't agree more, Mr. Staver. The fact is that there was an inquiry from the Miami New Times to the Sanford City Council asking about the possibility of some pro-gun rights movement in Sanford. The only sort of unrest, you could say, is people who were in favor of promoting the stand your ground law at the time in that town. And it was a very small contingent. Nevertheless, that request for assistance or for information about it was completely ignored. The peacekeepers never reached out to them by any documents that they provided to me respecting the case. And so they pick and choose who they want to help and work with and negotiate and mediate for. So it seems more like an advocacy position rather than truly balanced and fair all around.
Well, Lisette, thank you for your work on this. I know that you're doing a lot of other Freedom of Information Act requests, not only on this case that brought to light some very disturbing information, but on other cases as well. And thank you for keeping the government honest, at least informing the people so that we know what our government is doing and how we can respond. I appreciate you coming on our program, Faith and Freedom. Thank you, Lisette.
Of course, it's my privilege. Thank you so much, Mr. Staver.
Well, we've been talking to Lisette Garcia. She performed a Freedom of Information Act, and she does that in many situations, but it revealed some disturbing information with regards to the Department of Justice. Actually, looks like they were promoting racial division rather than trying to keep the peace in the Trayvon Martin case. Go to Liberty Counsel's website for more information. Find out how you can be involved in having a voice to stand for liberty, life, and family, you can go to lc.org. That's lc.org. You can sign up for our Liberator, our newsletter, and several emails right there on the website at lc.org. Also, be sure to ask for the Patriots Handbook series. The first Patriot Handbook series includes the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, an essay from me, and also the famous speech from Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty or give me death." Go to lc.org for more information. That's lc.org.
You have been listening to Faith and Freedom with Liberty Counsel. We hope that we have motivated you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedom. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email updates. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.